This recording will describe the questions and demonstrate the functionality associated with Screen 7.0, Terminal Sterilization of Drug Product by Moist Steam, and the Sterilization Process Validation QBR. The first screen asks the user to identify the autoclave loads used at the facility for terminal sterilization of the finished product. To add a load, click the green plus sign. The first box of the new screen asks you to identify the load. After entering the load identifier, the next box asks for a description of the load used for the validation and production cycles if they differ. Additionally, any information regarding a bracket, master load, or worst case load should be entered here. The next box asks for a justification of the thermocouple and biological indicator locations, including the number of thermocouples and biological indicators. Load diagrams and other details with summary data to support the justification should be provided in Module 3. Each of these boxes requires information to be entered, and hence can be opened by clicking on the yellow light bulbs. The last question asks if the cycle validation was performed using a simulated product. If the answer is yes, a description of the simulated product formulation and characteristics, as well as justification for the use of simulated product, should be entered into the box. If the answer is no, no further information is required. After entering the information for load 1, the green plus sign can be clicked to open a new load. This opens a new screen that is identical to the screen for load 1. This process can be repeated for all loads that are being submitted. The horizontal blue arrows at the top of the screen allow for cycling between loads. Alternatively, you can click the list button to show a list of all the loads that have been entered. In the list, loads can be deleted individually using the single red minus, or all loads can be deleted using the multiple red minus signs. Clicking either of the delete buttons will prompt a question ensuring this is the correct action. The loads can be reordered using the vertical blue arrows in the upper right corner. Clicking the info button will bring up information on how to use this screen. After completion of the general information, clicking the green next arrow will bring up the next screen, 7.1.1 Validation and Production Parameters. This screen asks the user to identify the validation and production parameters for the autoclave cycle. All of the fields located on this page are required. You can identify which cycle you are currently describing by referring to the load identifier field at the top of the page. It will be the cycle that you had most recently selected in section 7.1. For each load, the autoclave number, room number, and autoclave cycle number are requested if applicable. As noted in the provided hint for the autoclave cycle field, this field allows you to identify the cycle used for the sterilization of this load. The next box is for the type of cycle. If the bioburden cycle is selected, a box for the justification for the bioburden approach and the frequency of the ongoing bioburden monitoring will appear. This information is required. If the overkill approach is selected, no additional information is required. Next, the cycle time, temperature set point, and number of thermocouples are requested for both validation and production conditions. The number of biological indicators is only requested for the validation conditions. If this information for this cycle is shared between loads, it can be saved into the data book. A completed cycle can be saved to the data book for future use by using the blue box with the green up arrow. Useful information for the use of the data book can be viewed by clicking on the yellow light bulb. Once you have entered a name for this cycle, click OK to save this information to the data book for terminal sterilization of finished product section. A name for the data is provided by default, but you may also enter your own. You will be notified that the data has been successfully saved. Once data have been saved to the data book, they may be retrieved for future use by clicking on the blue box with the red down arrow. The data book interface allows the user to browse all previously saved terminal sterilization parameters. Future versions of this functionality will allow for editing of saved data, as well as deletion of saved data book entries. To apply the parameters from a saved data book entry to the current cycle being edited, choose Select while the relevant entry is highlighted. You should still confirm that the information is copied from the data book is accurate once it is imported. Click on the green arrow at the top of the screen to proceed to section 7.1.2, Biological Indicator. This screen asks the user to identify the biological indicator used for validation. You can identify which cycle you are currently describing by referring to the load identifier field at the top of the page. It will be the cycle that you had most recently selected in section 7.1. The first box asks for the species of the biological indicator. In the next field, indicate whether this biological indicator is a spore suspension or a spore strip. Next, indicate whether this BI is prepared in-house or purchased from a manufacturer. Note that the required information is dependent upon the source of the indicator. Complete all of the remaining fields. All fields must be completed to continue. A completed load can be saved to the data book for future use by clicking the blue box with the green up arrow. Useful information for when using the data book can be viewed by clicking on the yellow light bulb. A name for the data is provided by default and is based on the cycle ID, but you may also enter your own. Once you have entered a name for this load, click OK to save this information to the data book for the biological indicator section. You will be notified that the data has been successfully saved. Similar to the previous screen, data can be retrieved from the data book by clicking the blue box with the red down arrow. The data book interface allows the user to browse all previously saved biological indicator data. To apply the parameters from a saved data book entry to the current cycle being edited, choose Select while the relevant entry is highlighted. You should still confirm that the information copied from the data book is accurate once it is imported, particularly since information regarding lot numbers, populations, and D values are not saved in the data book. Also note that COAs for biological indicators described in this section should be included in Module 3. Click the green next arrow to proceed to section 7.1.3, Validation Run Results. This screen asks the user to include the results from the validation runs. You can identify which autoclave load you are currently describing by referring to the load identifier field at the top of the page. It will be the cycle that you had most recently selected in section 7.1. Fill in the first field with the acceptance criteria for the minimum F sub 0 for the validation of the cycle. Fill in the second field with the acceptance criterion for the biological indicator for validation of this cycle. Once you have entered these acceptance criteria, you are able to save these entries for use in describing other cycles through the use of the data book feature, in a similar manner to its use in the previous screens. By clicking the blue box with the green up arrow, this data can be saved into the data book. Once you have entered a name for this cycle, click OK to save this information to the data book for the terminal sterilization of finished products section. A name for the data is generated by default, but you may also enter your own. Once you click OK, you will be notified that the data has been saved successfully. Once data have been saved to the databook, they may be retrieved for future use by reaccessing the databook by clicking the blue box with the red down arrow. The databook interface allows the user to browse all previously saved biological indicator data. To apply the parameters from a saved databook entry to the current cycle being edited, choose Select while the relevant entry is highlighted. You should still confirm that the information copied from the databook is accurate once it is imported. Once the acceptance criteria for your validation runs have been entered, the Run Results section asks the user to enter data from completed validation runs. CVM's expectations regarding what data are required to support full validation of an autoclave load can be found by clicking on the hint icon. To add the results from a validation run, click the Add Run Result button, or the green plus sign. Enter the date the run was completed, the minimum F sub 0 achieved, and the biological indicator results from that run. Once entered, runs can be edited by clicking the Edited Select Run Result button, the green pencil. Runs can be deleted by clicking the Delete Selected Run Result button, the red minus sign. Once multiple runs have been entered, they can be selected by clicking and reordered within the display using the vertical blue arrows. Note that run results are not saved in the databook and must be entered separately for each cycle described. Click on the green next arrow to proceed to section 7.1.4, hold times. This screen asks the user if a hold time has been established for the filled product. If the answer is yes, you will be asked to list the maximum allowed hold time between the end of filling and beginning of sterilization, and to provide a summary of the results of the bioburden study to support this hold time. A copy of the report or any other supporting data can be provided in Module 3. A hint is provided to define the end of filling and the beginning of sterilization. Answers to both of the questions on this screen are required. If the answer to the first question is no, no further information is required. To enter information for other autoclave loads, return to section 7.1, General Information, by double-clicking that section on the left navigation pane. In the load list, click the next load for which you would like to complete sections 7.1.1 through section 7.1.4. Once that cycle is selected, click on the green next arrow. Remember to refer to the load identifier text field to confirm that you are editing the desired cycle. You can now enter information regarding the validation and production parameters, biological indicator, and validation run results for other autoclave loads in section 7.1.1 through section 7.1.4, just as you did for the first cycle. You may again enter values manually or import values saved from the databook entries. Once you have completed section 7.1.1 through 7.1.4 for all autoclave loads employed at this facility, proceed to section 7.2, Requalification, either by using the navigation arrows at the top of the screen or by double-clicking on section 7.2. This screen asks the user to describe the requalification strategy. As the hint indicates, this includes what loads are used for requalification studies, what loads are covered by the bracket but not requalified, and the frequency of requalification, at least annually. Brackets, master loads, and worst case loads, if utilized, should also be justified here.